Hi, I'm Captain Homer. I run an organization called Clean Oceans International. We're working on practical solutions for plastic pollution. Most of you are aware that plastic pollution is a real problem in the world today. The question is, what are we going to do about it? There are a lot of organizations in the world that have programs and plans on what to do about plastic pollution, all the way from banning plastics completely to running large ships and equipment out into the middle of the ocean to clean that plastic up. And those all have their benefits, and some of them have their own problems as well. And Clean Oceans International, we have our own ideas about what to do about it, and we'd like to offer them as part of the solution to the global plastic pollution problem. And that's what I'm standing next to right here. This is our early prototype of the plastic to fuel conversion system. Plastic to fuel sounds like a really interesting idea. It's really quite simple. I like to say it's a cross between grandma's pressure cooker and grandpa's still. This one's very, very simple to operate. On my side of the machine here is the reactor chamber, and we take our waste plastic, it doesn't have to be processed or really cleaned very well, put it directly into the reactor chamber, close it all up, and turn the machine on. On this side of our equation, if you will, is a small computer which controls the heating systems in the reactor chamber. The reactor chamber is then brought up slowly through a series of stages to 800 degrees Fahrenheit, at which time the plastic itself will be vaporized. The only way it can escape this reactor chamber is up through this cooling pipe here, goes over into the cooling chamber, and as a condenser or a cooling system, we're using water. The benefit of that is A, it's cheap, and B, it allows you to observe the plastic to fuel conversion process happening. That cools the gases off, and then it will begin to form an oil skim on the top of the water in the bucket here. That is very, very close to diesel fuel with just a little bit of refining. It can be made into a diesel fuel product that is then able to be used in farm equipment, boats, automobiles, whatever you might need to run a diesel engine for. The beauty of this is it imparts a value to your plastic waste that's directly related to the value of diesel fuel. It doesn't have to have a giant population. It can be brought down to a level to match the size of the community that is responding to their own plastic pollution problem. That keeps the plastic management in that community. It keeps the benefits of that plastic management in that community, which will then motivate that community to manage their own plastic waste. If we can provide that opportunity for everyone around the world to manage their own plastic waste and get their own benefits, then we'll have a solution with everyone on the planet contributing. It took about a human lifetime and an entire planet's full of people to create the problem. It's probably going to take about a human lifetime and the cooperation of everybody on the planet to come up with a reasonable solution. This is our idea. We're going to load this machine here for you now and run a little demonstration of how that goes. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again at the end of the demonstration. So we're going to load up our machine right now and demonstrate how it works. It's really quite simple. This is again the reactor chamber. I take a very heavy stainless steel lid off the top of it. I can use a number of different types of plastic. This system is set up to run types 2, 4, 5, and 6 in your plastic resin recycling codes. That is low and high density polyethylene, polypropylene, and polystyrene. Actually, polystyrene and polypropylene in that order. This chamber will cope with about a kilo of plastic. That is represented here with this bag. This is plastic that's set up for an automated feed system. But it gives you a pretty good idea of how much plastic is involved in a kilo. The different types, the film plastic, polyethylene, beautiful stuff. Pop that right on in there. Polyethylene foam packaging that is a common problem. So we just tear that into little pieces, add that to the system just as is. One of the beauties of this particular system is that you don't need to clean the plastic very carefully at all. It can handle about 10% of contaminant by volume, by weight, and most of the plastic to fuel conversion systems, even the large ones, have a very similar tolerability for waste. Again, I'll add a little bit more of the plastic bags here, and then I think we have a little bit of styrofoam. Just for after dinner mints. Put that in. Good sound effects. Well, I think we've had enough. Great. So that's loaded. Again, extremely simple. Put the lid back down. Bolt it with these wing bolts here, because you want this system to be airtight. There's gaskets set up to do that exact thing. High temperature, obviously. Bolt that down. Now, this is a batch system. That is, I do one batch at a time. There are also continuous feed style. As I mentioned, that's why this particular bag here has the plastic shredded up so that it can run through an automatic feed screw. Batch converters have some advantages and some disadvantages as the continuous feeds also. The continuous feed will give you long-term consistent temperature and the ability to run a large amount of your feedstock through the system at any one time. The batch systems can be extremely simple to use, therefore they're a little bit better of a solution in some of the remote locations where doing maintenance on a machine might be an issue. We now connect the two parts of the machine with this cooling tube that we talked about in the first part of the introduction. Screw that down on there, lightly at first. Attach it to the system here with a special clamp. And then tighten that back down. Doesn't have to be wrenched on very hard, just enough to make sure that everything is snug. Great, simple enough. Now, Nakajima-san, who built this particular system, has an interesting sense of humor, and when you run this, you will see that the menu here has some suggestions that are kind of interesting. It's real simple. Touch the screen and it starts, and it will give you written text prompts as to what it wants to do next. It says, set up for operation from now on. Great, so we push. There's either a little blue man to go or a red man to stop. We turn on the blue man. Okay, so it gives us all of the temperature settings that it's ready to go at, and they've all been preset, so great. We continue on with the blue man. It says confirm settings, touch me please. Okay, so we've realized that those are the right temperatures. We touch that. Now it's going to ask you questions to make sure you haven't forgotten any of the steps. Did you close the cover? That's a good idea to do that, yes. Is the water a fixed quantity? Yes. Did you set the hydro gas filter? Yes, that's a catalytic converter on the back of the machine. Yes, that's available too. Great, so now we have the mode selection. We touch that. It's got a few different options here. Push commence, and it tells you that the heating has begun. Now this process here, if we're going to process about a kilo of plastic, the quantity that this machine is set up to go through. It can take about 2.5 to 3 hours or so to run a complete batch. About a kilowatt of energy, so 3 kW, will convert a kilo of plastic waste into approximately a liter of oil. And as I said earlier, that can then be further refined to get it to diesel fuel and separated from gasoline, butane, and that sort of other thing. So we're going to let this start up, and we'll have a few questions to be brought up. We'll talk about the questions, and what you're going to see is as the reactor chamber begins to heat up, the gases, just the air in the chamber at first, will begin to expand. The only place it has to escape is up through that tube, and again down through the water bath. So what you're going to see is that air coming in first, and see bubbles forming at the bottom of that feeding tube, and that will tell us that things are beginning to happen. When it gets up to the operating temperature, you will begin to see a little bit of condensation happening on the inside of the glass tube here, and pretty soon after that you'll begin to see a little yellow layer of oil beginning to form on the surface of this cooling water. And that is, again, our cooling system. It's not a commercial style. This is an educational tool, mostly so you as the audience can understand what is happening. It's time to harvest the oil that we've produced. We're going to turn the machine off and drain it. Again, the way that this oil is produced is cooling through the water, and the oil sits as a skim on the top of the water. The draining tube that we have 2 different tubes in here. We filled the water to the top of this particular tube in here, and so everything above that level is oil. So if we open this valve, everything that's above that level will drain off, and after the machine has cooled down completely, we'll open up the other and take the old water out and store that for the future. Pretty straightforward and simple. We've got our container ready to go here. We like to use glass containers so everybody can see what's going on. Oil draining off. Taking a little bit longer there. There we go. Just that little extra. Fantastic. Now, if you were here with us, you would note that there's a different smell to this fluid than probably most anything else that you're familiar with. Plastic diesel started off as plastic, and so it comes with an inherent fragrance that's known only to this kind of fuel that I'm aware of anyway. So it's not like gasoline, it's not like diesel fuel, it's plastic diesel. But it's not that nice, so we're gonna cap it up. And that's, a little bit more than what we produced today out of a few handfuls of polyethylene sheeting and that sort of thing. But you get a basic idea of how this works. And as I say, to use this in machinery, we then have to refine it again. We would filter it through some paper and decant it a couple more times to make sure that we had no water in it to give a problem to our particular diesel machinery. I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to watch this video, pay attention to what's going on with plastic pollution in the world today. We hope that you like what we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. I like questions. I especially like the difficult questions because we learn from that, and hopefully I'll have an answer for you. If you have questions, you have information, you just want to talk, come to Clean Oceans International's website. Our contact information is available there. There is more information. Perhaps you'd be willing to get involved at some point. And contributions are always in season and in style here. This is a nonprofit organization, and I've always have to close with that request. I hope to meet all of you at some point down the line And thank you very much for being here today.